Chapter 21:15. Now that they knew the truth, the Tiangang sect disciples could only feel their faces burning up. Previously, they had thought that Bailey Hongzhuang's actions had embarrassed the Tiangang sect. However, from the looks of it now, they were the ones who had truly embarrassed the Tiangang sect. No matter what, they should not have caused an uproar and made a joke out of themselves in front of the medicine sect disciples. Gu Fengyan was stunned for a moment after hearing Sidu Yan's words. He admired Shangguan Yufeng even more. Every time, eldest senior brother saw things more accurately than him. Eldest senior brother was actually able to discover something that even the Tiangang sect disciples did not know about. He was truly amazing. The Alchemy Hall disciples who were initially dissatisfied with Bailey Hongzhuang's appearance also heaved a sigh of relief. Since this was an order from the sect master, Bailey Hongzhuang's pill refiner must be very good. Next, I will announce the rules of this alchemist competition. Qiaoying's voice rang out very quickly. The area around the high platform regained its silence. Everyone's gaze fell upon Qiaoying's as they listened carefully to the rules of the competition. The rules of this year's alchemist competition are very simple. The pill refiners will refine the highest grade pill within their abilities within 6 hours. The pill refiner with the highest grade will win. If the pills refined are of the same grade, the pill refiner with the higher grade will win. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded after hearing the rules of the competition. Just as Qiaoying's had said, these were the simplest rules of the competition. There were almost no requirements. It was just a competition to see who could refine the best pill. However, this method was also the best way to show the quality of the pill refiner's skills. Next, the alchemist competition will officially begin. Following Qiaoying's command, Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest quickly stood in their positions. The area of the high platform was very large, and it was in the shape of a staircase. There were 5 pill refiners in each row. This way, everyone could have a panoramic view of the pill refiners refining. Bailey Hongzhuang stood on the left side of the 4th floor. This was the position she had chosen randomly after everyone had chosen their own position. The 3rd floor was the most eye-catching row. Shangguan Yufeng of the medicine sect and Chu Qianyi of the Tiangang sect were standing in the middle of the row, adjacent to each other. Although there were many alchemists participating in the alchemist competition, everyone knew that the competition was basically a battle between Shangguan Yufeng and Chu Qianyi. The winner would definitely be one of these two. The table was already prepared, but the alchemy furnace was prepared by the alchemist himself. Every alchemist had their own alchemy furnace that they were used to. What's more, when an alchemist's alchemy skills reached such a level, they would definitely use a high-quality alchemy furnace to achieve the best result. It was not an easy task to take out 2 identical high-quality pill furnaces at the same time. In other words, this pill furnace was also another kind of competition between alchemists. When Shangguan Yufeng took out his alchemy furnace, everyone's eyes lit up. His alchemy furnace was completely black, and there were dragons and phoenixes circling around it. It was very majestic. Although many cultivators did not understand alchemy furnaces, they could distinguish the quality of an alchemy furnace at a glance. Chapter 21:16. It seemed that this time, the medicine sect had really put in a lot of effort in order to achieve good results in this alchemist competition. This black gold dragon phoenix furnace was a very famous alchemy furnace. Sect Master Gu was actually willing to take it out for Shangguan Yufeng to refine pills. Fortunately, they had already expected this, so they also gave the alchemy furnace in the sect to Chu Qianyi to use. At this time, they would never let the disciples of the sect lose because of the hard conditions. The next moment, Chu Qianyi took out a golden alchemy furnace. This alchemy furnace was golden in color, and there were fish circling around it. It was very lifelike. After Shangguan Yufeng saw the alchemy furnace that Chu Qianyi took out, his eyes could not help but change a little. 9 revolving spirit fish furnace. He did not expect that Tiangang sect would also take out an alchemy furnace for Chu Qianyi to use. It seemed that this time, it was impossible to beat Chu Qianyi in terms of alchemy furnace. However, the winner of this alchemist competition could only be him. The participating alchemists took out their alchemy furnaces, and Bailey Hongzhuang also took out a red alchemy furnace. This alchemy furnace was the one that she had obtained in the ruins of Yulinfeng. Although she did not know the name of this alchemy furnace, according to her judgment, this alchemy furnace was not ordinary. The quality of this alchemy furnace was also very high, and it was very easy for her to refine pills. At least, with this alchemy furnace, she no longer had to worry about the possibility of an explosion. On the contrary, this alchemy furnace could help her improve the quality and success rate of her pills. After Bailey Hongzhuang took out this alchemy furnace, Xia Jiqing's eyes could not help but show a touch of excitement. It seemed that this time, Hongzhuang was going to show her power. After Bailey Hongzhuang took out this red alchemy furnace, Situ Yen and Gu Weisheng's eyes changed slightly and fell on the alchemy furnace. Sect Master Situ, I didn't know that Tiangang sect had a Fire Phoenix golden pill furnace. Your trump card is hidden deep. As the sect master of the medicine sect, Gu Weisheng naturally had an extraordinary understanding of alchemy furnaces. The moment Bailey Hongzhuang took out this pill furnace, he had already judged that this pill furnace was an alchemist's weapon, the Fire Phoenix gold pill furnace. This cauldron was not inferior to the cauldrons used by Chu Qianyi and Shangguan Yufeng. In fact, its quality was even higher. However, the Fire Phoenix golden core furnace had not appeared in the world for many years. No one knew where it was. Who would have thought that it would appear in the hands of Bailey Hongzhuang? Si Tian was also a little surprised when he saw that Bailey Hongzhuang was using the Fire Phoenix gold pill furnace. He had never seen Bailey Hongzhuang refine pills before, so he didn't know much about the pill furnace she used. He did not expect Bailey Hongzhuang to have such a treasure. However, he naturally would not show his surprise in front of Gu Weisheng. Instead, he revealed a meaningful smile. Sect Master Gu has spent so much effort to do so many things this time. Naturally, I have to be prepared. Hearing Si Tian's words, Gu Weisheng's eyes could not help but become gloomy. Si Tian was really an old fox. He actually hid so many things. The Fire Phoenix gold pill furnace had appeared, and he had actually hidden this news. Chapter 21:17. Di Beichen, who was sitting beside Situ Yen, naturally heard the conversation between Situ Yen and Gu Weisheng. He was secretly surprised. Gu Weisheng didn't know, but he was very clear that this alchemy furnace belonged to Hongzhuang herself. Previously, he also didn't recognize that Hongzhuang's alchemy furnace was actually the famous Fire Phoenix gold alchemy furnace. Very quickly, the alchemist competition began. Lu Qinyue stood in the group. Her gaze didn't care about Chu Qianyi and Shangguan Yufeng. Instead, it fell on Bailey Hongzhuang. After not seeing her for such a long time, Bailey Hongzhuang's charm was outstanding, just like before. However, the commotion caused previously made her even more astonished. Bailey Hongzhuang was definitely a genius alchemist, but the disciples of Tiangang sect didn't know about it at all. It was really unexpected. Moreover, from the position where Bailey Hongzhuang was standing, it was obvious that she wasn't the main character of this alchemist competition. She had known Bailey Hongzhuang for so long. Bailey Hongzhuang had always been the main character, and had never been reduced to a supporting role. It seemed that Tiangang sect was indeed extraordinary. There were too many outstanding alchemists to mention. If she was lucky enough to become a member of Tiangang sect, she was afraid that she would have to cultivate even harder in the future. Bailey Hongzhuang stood in front of the alchemy furnace. Following the loud sound of gongs and drums, she started to take action. Almost all the alchemists started to take action at the same time. The level of the pills that they wanted to refine wasn't low, so the time spent naturally wouldn't be little. 6 hours seemed to be a long time, but once they started to refine the pills, this time wasn't considered much. If there was a mistake in the middle, then it was very likely that the second refinement would be too late. Therefore, although the requirements of this competition seemed simple, it was actually very harsh. Bailey Hongzhuang had already thought about it. The pill that she wanted to refine this time was a 6th grade pill, rejuvenation pill. The effect of the rejuvenation pill was different from the usual pills. It could let people regain their youth. To women, this was undoubtedly their favorite pill. The lifespan of cultivators was much longer than ordinary people. The speed of aging was also much slower. However, women naturally loved beauty, and aging was something that no woman was willing to accept. Therefore, the rejuvenation pill had always been a medicinal pill that many female cultivators fought over. However, the rejuvenation pill had not appeared in the Shengxian continent for a very long time. It was said that the pill formula for the rejuvenation pill had been lost. As a woman, Bailey Hongzhuang naturally remembered the pill formula of the rejuvenation pill very clearly. The rejuvenation pill was a superior pill among the 6th grade pills. It was quite complicated to refine. This time, she was going to rely on the rejuvenation pill to defeat Shangguan Yufeng. Putting aside the fact that the rejuvenation pill was of a high grade, in addition to the fact that it was a long-lost pill, unless it was a grade 7 pill, it would be very difficult to defeat her. The alchemist competition this time was related to Tiangang sect's reputation. She must protect it. Regardless of whether it was a 5th grade medicinal pill or a 6th grade medicinal pill, they were all extremely precious. Therefore, during the course of this competition, practically none of the alchemists had placed the medicinal ingredients one by one on the table. The reason for this was to prevent the pill formulas that he had refined from leaking out. Therefore, when every alchemist was refining a pill, they would need to take out a medicinal ingredient from their Qiankuan bag. Bailey Hongzhuang's mind stirred and the essence energy in her body gushed out. The fiery phoenix golden elixir furnace's alchemical fire also started to burn. Chapter 21:18. After the disciples of Tiangang sect first observed Chu Qianyi and Shangguan Yufeng refining the pills, they could not help but look at Bailey Hongzhuang. Speaking of which, Bailey Hongzhuang was not a candidate for the winner of this alchemist competition. However, she had stolen all the limelight. Although the sect leader had already said that Bailey Hongzhuang was allowed to participate in the alchemist competition, everyone could not help but be curious. They wanted to know how good Bailey Hongzhuang's alchemist skills were and whether she was qualified to participate in this alchemist competition. One must know that the alchemists standing on the high platform were all famous disciples in the alchemy palace. Usually, there were many cultivators who tried to curry favor with them. Even if Bailey Hongzhuang was an alchemist, it was extremely difficult for her to reach such a standard. Many disciples even thought that it was because some young sect leader had pleaded for Bailey Hongzhuang that Bailey Hongzhuang was able to have such an opportunity. If that was really the case, they really felt that the young sect leader was too protective of Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang could naturally feel the attention of the crowd. She did not think too much about it and did not expect that her appearance would cause such a huge commotion. However, as long as she succeeded in refining the pills, all these comments would disappear completely. Perhaps this was not a bad idea after all. Bailey Hongzhuang ignored everyone's gaze and concentrated on refining the pills. The refining process of the rejuvenation pill was extremely demanding. As long as there was a slight mistake, all the previous efforts would be wasted. Therefore, she had to concentrate fully to prevent any problems from occurring. Bailey Hongzhuang placed another medicinal herb into the fire phoenix golden pill furnace. The alchemy fire instantly engulfed the medicinal herb. The medicinal herb quickly withered and turned yellow. All the impurities were refined by the alchemy fire, leaving only the essence behind. After turning into the essence, Bailey Hongzhuang still used the alchemy fire to burn the small ball of essence. This was because there were also impurities in the essence. When the ball of essence became crystal clear without any impurities, Bailey Hongzhuang placed the ball of essence at the side of the alchemy furnace and began to extract the essence of the next medicinal herb. When Bailey Hongzhuang was doing this, the other alchemists were also going through the same step. Extracting the essence of the medicinal herb was the simplest thing in refining pills. However, one could not be impatient during the extraction and must control the fire well. Once the fire was small, the time spent on extracting the essence would increase greatly. Once the fire was large, the medicinal herb and essence would turn into nothingness in the blink of an eye. However, if a problem occurred during this process, as long as the alchemist still had the same medicinal ingredients, then there was still a chance to remedy it. As the grade of the pill, the ingredients would become more and the ingredient. So, the sect leader, the alchemist pill, the alchemists, had to Hongzhuang, and the alchemist fire phoenix golden pill furnace had. One was and Bailey Hongzhuang Huang and Bail leader to Lin, not to be. One Zhuang, one was, is the BBB, the sect. However, although they were doing the same thing, there were still some differences. For example, when Shangguan Yufeng and Chu Qianyi were extracting the essence of the medicinal herb, they looked calm as if it was not a big deal at all. Chapter 21:19. Even though many of the disciples present were not pill masters, they could tell from their expressions. I've heard that the medicine sect's trump card this time is Shangguan Yufeng. It seems that he does have some skills. Chu Qianyi's pill refining skills are also very powerful. Even if he goes up against Shangguan Yufeng, he shouldn't have any problems. That's true. Chu Qianyi has always been the most outstanding disciple in the pill refinement hall. Even though the medicine sect focuses on pill refining skills, I believe that Chu Qianyi's performance won't be too bad. Since this was Tiangang sect's home ground, all of the Tiangang sect disciples believed that Chu Qianyi would definitely defeat Shangguan Yufeng. They had long been annoyed by this group of arrogant outsiders. It would be best if they could use this opportunity to completely defeat them. They would like to see if they would be able to maintain their arrogance and haughtiness when that happens. However, when the crowd's eyes fell upon Bailey Hongzhuang, they realized that Bailey Hongzhuang had a calm and collected look on her face. This kind of confidence was not at all inferior to Shangguan Yufeng's and Chu Qianyi's. This was a little strange. It seems that Bailey Hongzhuang's pill refining skills aren't too bad either. One of the disciples could not help but sigh with emotion. However, most of the disciples did not believe it at all. I think you're overthinking things. The pills that other people have refined are either level 5 or level 6 pills. Who knows, maybe Bailey Hongzhuang has only refined level 2 or level 3 pills. They were a bunch of laymen and could only make a judgment based on the pill refiner's expressions and technique. They simply could not tell the level of the pills that they had refined. The other cultivators saw it differently, but Gu Weisheng and Situ Yen could see it clearly. This was because the number of medicinal herbs that Bailey Hongzhuang had taken out was not any less than the other pill refiners. In fact, compared to Shangguan Yufeng and Chu Qianyi, the number of medicinal herbs that Bailey Hongzhuang had taken out was one more than theirs. As far as they were concerned, this was something that was simply impossible. This did not mean that the pills that Bailey Hongzhuang had refined were of a higher grade than theirs. However, this was enough to prove that the speed at which Bailey Hongzhuang had extracted the essence of the herbs was much faster than theirs. Although this seemed simple and not that big of a deal, it was actually extremely difficult to actually carry out. Sect leader Situ, it seems like this Bailey Hongzhuang's alchemist is quite extraordinary. Gu Weisheng looked at Situ Yen tentatively. According to the information he had heard before, the most outstanding alchemist disciple in Tiangang sect was Chu Qianyi. Therefore, he had absolute confidence in this competition. However, he did not expect Bailey Hongzhuang to suddenly appear. Moreover, this Bailey Hongzhuang's performance was not simple at all. It was really unexpected. Although he felt that this Bailey Hongzhuang was very young and didn't look like she was very skilled in alchemy, he still felt a little uneasy in his heart. Situ Yan's gaze was somewhat complicated. Originally, he thought that Hong Zhuang wanted to use this opportunity to train. However, judging from Hong Zhuang's current performance, it did not seem like this was the case. The problem was that even he was not sure how good Hong Zhuang's alchemy skills were. In the next moment, Situ Yan only smiled faintly and did not answer Gu Weisheng's question. This was because he did not know how to answer. However, Situ Yan's deep smile fell into Gu Weisheng's eyes and became premeditated. Chapter 21:20. Gu Weisheng was vexed. If he had known about this earlier, he would have investigated thoroughly. It was all Situ Yan's fault for being so cunning. After falling for his trick last time, he didn't expect Situ Yan to become so smart. Di Baichen had a faint smile on his face. He had some understanding of Hong Zhuang's alchemy skills. Perhaps Hong Zhuang would amaze the world with a single brilliant feat in this year's alchemist competition. Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing had been standing behind Di Baichen the whole time. Although Gu Weisheng and Situ Yan's conversation was soft, they were able to hear it clearly at such a close distance. However, they were even more surprised when they heard what Yangming said. They didn't expect their daughter to be so outstanding in alchemy. Not only that, Bailey Hongzhuang's smooth and methodical manner of refining pills showed that she had been immersed in alchemy for a long time. Moreover, Bailey Hongzhuang was still able to remain calm in the face of all the disciples' doubts. Her mental fortitude was already incomparable to an ordinary person. Although they didn't know the final result of the alchemist competition, they were already proud of their daughter. Time passed slowly. Alchemy was originally a slow and boring process. However, none of the disciples present felt bored. Instead, they were constantly paying attention to the changes in each alchemist. The surroundings gradually quieted down. Everyone shut their mouths, but their eyes were still sizing up the alchemists. After 2 hours, Bailey Hongzhuang finally finished refining all the essences of the medicinal herbs. Because there were many herbs, the time needed to refine them would increase by a lot. Almost at the same time, many alchemists had finished refining the herbs. Next was the most important time to fuse them. To fuse herbs of different attributes together, one had to be extremely careful in this process. Otherwise, if there was a problem, everything would be useless and they would have to start all over again. Bailey Hongzhuang carefully controlled the fire and slowly gathered all the essences together. This process was extremely slow and couldn't be rushed. Her mental strength wrapped around the fire and the essences of the herbs. She could adjust them at any time. The slightest deviation would cause all her previous efforts to be wasted. Chi! A muffled sound was heard, followed by a burning smell that spread out from the alchemy furnace and quickly engulfed the entire competition platform. One of the alchemists in front of Bailey Hongzhuang encountered a problem during the fusion process, and everything turned into nothingness. After everyone saw that this alchemist was a Tiangang sect disciple, their faces couldn't help but become ugly. At the same time, the disciple's face became extremely ugly. He stared blankly at the scene before him, as if he could not believe that he had failed to merge. He also did not know what to do, so he could only stand there with a pale face. A group of Tiangang sect disciples couldn't help but sigh after seeing this scene. This was really a bad start. A smile appeared on Gu Weisheng's face. The Tiangang sect's disciple was the first to fail. This was a good thing. On the other hand, Situ Yan's expression did not look so good. At this moment, another similar voice sounded. Chi. Chapter 21:21. When the crowd saw the alchemist who had failed, they heaved a sigh of relief. This was because he was an alchemist from the medicine sect. Situ Yan, who had a slightly ugly expression, immediately relaxed when he saw this scene. The smile on Gu Weisheng's face could no longer be maintained, and he returned to his normal state. Although the two alchemists who had failed were embarrassed and flustered for a moment, they quickly regained their senses and continued refining. There were still 4 hours left. As long as they were a little faster, they could still make it in time. Bailey Hongzhuang turned a deaf ear to what was happening around her. Her eyes, ears, and heart were only focused on the changes in the pill furnace. Earlier on, she had already tried to refine the miracle cure pill. As she had successfully refined it before, she had a certain level of confidence in her heart. At a time like this, she definitely could not be influenced by others. Not only Bailey Hongzhuang, but Shangguan Yufeng and Chu Qianyi also turned a deaf ear to what was happening around them. However, the other alchemists might not be able to do this. At a crucial moment like this, under the eyes of tens of thousands of people, in addition to being influenced by other alchemists, it was very likely that they would fail. In the time it took for an incense stick to burn, one after another, the sound of failure quietly rang out. Originally, there were a total of 20 alchemists participating in the alchemist competition. In the blink of an eye, 8 alchemists had already failed. Seeing this scene, the disciples who were present sighed deeply in their hearts. It was indeed not easy to be an alchemist. The slightest bit of carelessness would result in failure. It was really a pity that so many precious medicinal herbs had turned into nothingness just like that. It was precisely because the failure rate of refining a high-grade pill was very high that the price of a high-grade pill was even higher. However, when the crowd saw that Bailey Hongzhuang was not one of the alchemists who had failed, they were slightly stunned. They did not expect Bailey Hongzhuang to be able to persevere for so long. It was much better than what they had imagined. As more and more alchemists failed, the alchemists who were originally flustered were no longer flustered. Instead, they began to refine the second pill. After all, they were not the only ones who had failed. As long as they made the best use of their time, they still had one more chance. If they were any later, they would directly declare their failure. After this incident, the atmosphere became even more tense. Bailey Hongzhuang carefully controlled the heat, not allowing any deviation. Under Bailey Hongzhuang's precise control, all the essences of the herbs gradually merged together. Although there was still some rejection, Bailey Hongzhuang controlled it very well. As long as there were no problems, the fusion would happen sooner or later. On the other hand, Shangguan Yufeng and Chu Qianyi didn't seem to be affected by their surroundings at all. Both of them understood that the performance of the other disciples wasn't important at all. The most important thing was their performance. Only if they performed well would they be able to win this competition. They were all entrusted with great responsibilities, and none of them were willing to embarrass their sect. An hour passed quietly. The medicinal pills in the pill furnaces of the alchemists, who had never failed, had already gradually taken shape. However, at a time like this, it was still extremely critical. As long as the pill was not successfully refined, it would still be very fragile. If there was even the slightest deviation in control, then all the previous efforts would be wasted. Chapter 21-22. The Tiangang sect disciples heaved a sigh of relief when they saw Chu Qianyi's calm and confident look. At the very least, Chu Qianyi would be able to successfully refine the pill. Although they did not know whether Chu Qianyi or Shangguan Yufeng would refine a better pill, they believed that Chu Qianyi would not lose. At this moment, Shangguan Yufeng quietly glanced at Gu Fengyan, who was beside him. This subtle movement was not noticed by ordinary people. However, Shangguan Yufeng was the focus of everyone's attention. Therefore, some cultivators still noticed it. Gu Fengyan's lips slowly curled into a sinister smile when he saw Shangguan Yufeng's expression. In the next moment, Gu Fengyan's mental energy quietly spread out and slowly moved towards Shangguan Yufeng's direction. Just as Gu Fengyan made this move, the medicine sect's disciples around the high stage all moved their mental energy towards Shangguan Yufeng. In a short period of time, Shangguan Yufeng's mental energy had become much stronger than before. Mental energy was originally invisible. However, the cultivators present were not ordinary people. They could feel a huge wave of mental energy spreading out from Shangguan Yufeng. Seeing this scene, everyone present was stunned for a moment. What's going on? What kind of trick are the medicine sect's alchemists playing? Their mental energy has all gathered on Shangguan Yufeng. Could it be that they want to use this method to allow Shangguan Yufeng to refine a higher-grade pill? Oh no, look, Chu Qianyi's expression has changed. Under everyone's gaze, Chu Qianyi's brows were tightly knitted together. His previously indifferent look had disappeared and was replaced by a look of clenching his teeth. Di Baichen's expression changed when he saw this scene. Although he was not an alchemist, he had a deep understanding of mental energy. The medicine sect's alchemists were all standing with Shangguan Yufeng as the center. Everyone's mental energy had merged with Shangguan Yufeng's. As a result, Shangguan Yufeng's mental energy was far from ordinary. Most importantly, under such circumstances, the mental energy of the surrounding alchemists would be affected to a certain extent and would be absorbed by Shangguan Yufeng's mental energy. In the final stage of refining pills, mental strength was the most important. As long as there was a slight deviation, the medicinal pill would be completely destroyed. Moreover, Chu Qianyi was standing right next to Shangguan Yufeng. He was the one who was affected the most. Situ Yan's face instantly turned gloomy. He was wondering why Gu Weisheng insisted on holding the alchemist competition under such circumstances. As it turned out, Shangguan Yufeng was not his trump card. Such a despicable method was his trump card for sure victory. It wasn't enough that Gu Weisheng tricked him last time. This time, he did such a thing so blatantly. It was too much. Sect Master Gu, this is a competition of alchemy. Don't you think it's a little too despicable to use such underhanded means? After Gu Weisheng did such a thing, Si Tuyen no longer spoke politely. Gu Weisheng smiled faintly when he heard Si Tuyen's words. Sect Head Situ, this Shangguan Yufeng can't control his mental power when he's refining pills. It's very easy for this kind of situation to occur. This was just an accident. It was very easy for accidents to happen during the process of alchemy. Chapter 21-23. When he saw Gu Weisheng's unconcerned smile, Situ Yen could only silently curse him for being despicable. As the sect master of the medicine sect, Gu Weisheng was actually despicable to such an extent. He was simply too shameless. He was not blind. He had seen everything that had just happened clearly. This was a scheme that the medicine sect had been plotting for a long time. Sect Master Gu, you'd better make them stop this quickly, Situ Yen slowly said. Sect Master Situ, what you're saying is wrong. Shangguan Yufeng is currently at a critical juncture in pill refinement, and this kind of situation would occasionally occur. If I were to forcefully stop it, wouldn't Shangguan Yufeng's pill refinement fail? I believe that for the sake of fairness, Sect Master Situ wouldn't allow me to do so, would you? Gu Weisheng's expression was calm. He had already calculated everything. The medicine sect must win this competition. Some people believe that this situation was deliberate while others believe that it was a coincidence. Of course, to most people, the outcome was the most important. In this world, almost everyone would only remember the name of the victor, and not the process. Mu Lingbing and Lan Yunxiao naturally understood the situation as well. When they heard Gu Weisheng's explanation, they could not help but sigh. This fellow was simply too despicable. For his skin to be so thick to such an extent, it really made one blush with shame. Gu Weisheng, don't go overboard. Situ Yan's face was filled with anger. He had already given Gu Weisheng face in the past, but he never thought that Gu Weisheng would continue to push his luck. Sect Master Situ, I'm speaking the truth. If you were to forcefully stop it, everyone would say that it's unfair. Gu Weisheng looked as if he did not care. If he was shameless, so be it. The current situation was to put Situ Yen in a difficult position. The four Great Hall Masters' expressions changed instantly. This situation had exceeded their expectations. Chu Qianyi's expression is turning uglier by the minute. If this continues, he won't be able to hold on for much longer. Gu Jingqing furrowed his brows. This situation had exceeded everyone's expectations. I never thought that the medicine sect master would be so despicable. This is putting the sect master in a difficult position. Yan Kaicheng's expression was solemn. Usually, as a sect master, regardless of his nature, he would not do such a thing so brazenly. He never thought that Gu Weisheng would not play his cards according to common sense. I'm afraid that our Tiangang sect will fall this time. A malicious light filled his eyes. This competition was to be held in Tiangang sect. If they were to forcefully stop it, then it would be their fault. No matter how one looked at it, they would be at a disadvantage. Although the Tiangang sect disciples present did not understand what had happened, they also understood that this matter was extremely unfavorable to Tiangang sect. Shangguan Yufeng's lips gradually widened. He had already said that they would definitely win the alchemist competition this time. Chu Qian alone was situ after Bailey Hongzhuang noticed the actions of Shangguan Yufeng and the others. There was a touch of anger in her eyes. Initially, she had thought that the medicine sect was already a shameless sect. She never thought that she would have underestimated the shamelessness of the medicine sect. Chapter 21-24. Chu Qian's face was getting uglier and uglier. His mental strength was gradually being controlled by Shangguan Yufeng. If this continues, he won't be able to hold on until the pill is refined. He will fail. The faces of the disciples of the Alchemy Palace suddenly changed. Originally, they were very confident about this competition. They never thought that such a thing would suddenly happen. Now the sect master and the palace masters obviously had no other way. What could they do if this continued? It's completely over now. Once Chu Qian loses, we will lose without a doubt. How can the people of the medicine sect use such means? They are clearly interfering with Chu Qian. All the disciples were anxious. They did not want to be defeated by such a conspiracy. The faces of Xia Jiqing and the others were also ugly to the extreme. They had never seen such a thing. However, from the mouths of some knowledgeable disciples, they also understood the specific situation. What should we do now? Xia Jiqing was completely speechless. Fortunately, Hong Zhuang is standing at the side. The other alchemists can't affect her. I didn't expect the medicine sect to set up such a big trap. I'm afraid that this position was also thought of before. It just so happens that Shangguan Yufeng and Chu Qian are in the middle. Bai Junyu's face was gloomy. He didn't think so before, but now that he looked at it, this was clearly planned. It seems that the result of this competition can only depend on Hong Zhuang. I just don't know if Hong Zhuang can refine a 6th-grade pill. Gong Shaoqing's face was full of worry. He knew that Hong Zhuang could refine a 5th-grade pill, but he didn't know if she had improved. In my opinion, the situation is not good. Dongfang Yu shook his head. This was the worst situation that everyone had expected. Bailey Hongzhuang controlled the heat in the Fire Phoenix Gold Pill Furnace while paying attention to the concentration of mental strength. She had seen this method in her previous life, but she had always been very disdainful of it. This was a very unpopular method. It was only effective in an environment like the alchemist competition. In the past, there were not many people who dared to use it openly. She didn't expect to see it again today. As she looked carefully, she found that this was only a simplified version of what she had seen before. In fact, such a situation was no different from a small-scale formation. Through the power of the array, all the mind power was gathered on Shangguan Yufeng's body. She could conclude that other than Shangguan Yufeng, the other alchemists had never planned to properly refine medicinal pills from the very beginning. What they needed to do was to use all of their strength to ensure that Shangguan Yufeng's refining was successful, thus interfering with the others. He had to admit that this was a very good idea. What is Hong Zhuang doing? Mu Lingbing couldn't help but whisper to Bailey Hongzhuang when she noticed that Bailey Hongzhuang wasn't concentrating on refining the pill, but was instead paying attention to the surroundings. Hearing Mu Lingbing's words, Lan Yunxiao and Di Beichen couldn't help looking at Bailey Hongzhuang. Sure enough, they saw Bailey Hongzhuang looking around as if she was looking for something. Bailey Hongzhuang was the alchemist standing on the far left, so she wasn't affected by the mental strength at all. At this time, Bailey Hongzhuang should be concentrating on refining pills. What was she doing now? Di Beichen and the other two couldn't understand, but they felt that Bailey Hongzhuang wasn't doing something useless. Chapter 21-25. Bailey Hongzhuang was paying attention to the mental strength in front of her. Her mental strength was much stronger than ordinary people. Even among alchemists, there were very few who could compare to her. Since this was an array, there was naturally a way to break it. However, most people had never come into contact with this kind of situation, so they didn't understand it well enough. However, since they met Bailey Hongzhuang, she would naturally make all of this disappear. After a moment, Bailey Hongzhuang had already found the location of the array's core. Chu Qianyi was obviously unable to hold on any longer. If he didn't immediately break the array, he would fail. In the next moment, Bailey Hongzhuang's mental strength instantly spread out. Everyone only felt an extremely powerful mental strength appear with Bailey Hongzhuang at the center, directly charging towards the center of Shangguan Yufeng and the rest's mental strength. When this mental strength appeared, all the cultivators present sucked in a breath of cold air. Everyone looked at this scene in astonishment, wondering if their eyes were playing tricks on them. Such terrifying mental strength, was it really Bailey Hongzhuang's? Heavens! Bailey Hongzhuang's mental strength is too terrifying, isn't it? I never knew that Bailey Hongzhuang's mental strength had reached such a level. This mental strength isn't inferior to the combined mental strength of Shangguan Yufeng and the rest. Damn, so this Bailey Hongzhuang is really so powerful. For a moment, the Tiangang sect's disciples couldn't care less about what Bailey Hongzhuang was doing. They were already shocked by the dense mental strength. As cultivators, their mental strength was much stronger than ordinary people. However, compared to Bailey Hongzhuang, they were completely trash. Mu Lingbing and Lan Yunxiao were also stunned for a moment. They never thought that Bailey Hongzhuang's mental strength could reach such a level. Wasn't this too abnormal? No matter if it was Lan Yunxiao or Mu Lingbing, they had always been famous geniuses. However, in terms of mental strength, they really couldn't compare to Bailey Hongzhuang. After seeing Bailey Hongzhuang's powerful mental strength, they also understood. No wonder Bailey Hongzhuang could become an alchemist. If she didn't become an alchemist with such powerful mental strength, it would be a waste of her talent. When Gu Weisheng saw Bailey Hongzhuang's sudden burst of mental strength, his pupils shrank and his eyes were filled with shock. He had previously felt that he had miscalculated a bit and did not include Bailey Hongzhuang in his calculations. He did not expect that Bailey Hongzhuang would suddenly make such a move, which made him even more surprised. The method used by Shangguan Yufeng and the others was taught by him. Similarly, he also knew the fatal weakness of this array formation. However, Bailey Hongzhuang was so young and shouldn't know about it. Si Tian looked at Bailey Hongzhuang in confusion. He didn't know the meaning behind Bailey Hongzhuang's sudden action. However, in the next moment, under everyone's gaze, Bailey Hongzhuang's mental strength directly charged towards Shangguan Yufeng's head. Chi. The crowd only heard a soft sound. Soon after, Shangguan Yufeng's face quickly flushed red, and he no longer had his previous complacent expression. It wasn't just Shangguan Yufeng. The faces of the medicine sect's alchemists all turned pale, and they fell into a weakened state. Chapter 21-26. Chu Qianyi gritted his teeth and held on. He does not wish for all his previous efforts to go to waste. He would never be able to forgive himself if he were to fail at such an important moment for Tiangang sect. However, the pressure was simply too great. Even though he had gritted his teeth, the waves of attraction were still pushing him to the brink of collapse. However, in an instant, all of the pressure disappeared without a trace. He could not help but pant heavily. It was a good thing that he had held on. Otherwise, only medicinal dregs would be left in the pill cauldron. Once Chu Qianyi had relaxed, he could not help but observe his surroundings. He noticed that Shangguan Yufeng no longer looked as high-spirited as before. On the contrary, his face was extremely pale, as if he was suffering even more than before. Chu Qianyi could not help but feel happy when he saw Shangguan Yufeng's state. However, his heart was filled with curiosity. He could not understand why the formation had suddenly disappeared and how Shangguan Yufeng had ended up in this state. Chi! Chi! Chi chi chi! The sound of the pill cauldrons being destroyed could be heard. The medicine sect's pill masters were greatly affected after the formation had been destroyed and could no longer control the pills in their pill cauldrons to continue refining. As a result, the sound of the pills being destroyed could be heard one after another. Aside from Shangguan Yufeng, the medicine sect's pill masters had all been wiped out. This sudden turn of events caused everyone present to gasp involuntarily. Just a second ago, the medicine sect's pill masters had been acting wildly. However, in the next second, because of Bailey Hongzhuang's actions, Shangguan Yufeng was the only pill master left in the medicine sect who was bitterly holding on. Bailey Hongzhuang had single-handedly fought against the entire medicine sect. The disciples were all dumbfounded. They simply could not understand what had just happened. They only knew that Bailey Hongzhuang had managed to solve this unsolvable problem with just a single move? Damn, isn't Bailey Hongzhuang a little too awesome? Who was the one who had said that Bailey Hongzhuang was useless? Step forward. I'm going to beat him to death. This is far too domineering. Her mental strength is enough to fight against all the medicine masters in the medicine sect. The disciples who were originally full of doubts and distrust towards Bailey Hongzhuang no longer had any doubts at this moment. Not to mention Bailey Hongzhuang's alchemy skills, just her mental strength alone was something that no one could compare to. Chu Qianyi and so many others were unable to do anything about the medicine sect's actions, but Bailey Hongzhuang was able to resolve all of this on her own. Just this point alone was enough to show how powerful Bailey Hongzhuang was. Moreover, since Bailey Hongzhuang was able to solve the problem that Chu Qianyi and the others couldn't, it proved that Bailey Hongzhuang's understanding of alchemy was even deeper than theirs. If they were worried that Bailey Hongzhuang would bring shame to Tiangang's sect after she stepped onto the high platform, now they felt that they were frogs at the bottom of the well. Bailey Hongzhuang was clearly the one who saved Tiangang Zong from a complete defeat. She was Tiangang sect's hero. Xia Jiqing and the others were dumbfounded when they saw Bailey Hongzhuang's actions. They had always known that Bailey Hongzhuang was very powerful, but she had never been this powerful before. Chapter 21-27. This senior sister is so domineering. I'm dumbstruck. The Tiangang sect is indeed powerful. I really hope I can become a member of the Tiangang sect. No wonder this senior sister caused such a commotion when she went up on stage. She's the most outstanding alchemist. The cultivators beside Lu Qinyue were filled with envy. They had admired the Tiangang sect for a long time. Today, they saw that the Tiangang sect was simply too powerful. Lu Qinyue's gaze fell on Bailey Hongzhuang. It seemed that her previous judgment was wrong. Bailey Hongzhuang would always be the focus of everyone's attention no matter where she was. She had a special ability. No matter what kind of platform she stood on, she would always be the focus of everyone's attention. In the past, she was also arrogant because she was also an existence that received a lot of attention. However, ever since she met Bailey Hongzhuang, she realized that she was only the light of a firefly. Bailey Hongzhuang was the light of the sun and the moon. Even if Bailey Hongzhuang walked up the stage in a low-key manner, she was always able to remain calm in the face of everyone's mistrust. In comparison, she did not have Bailey Hongzhuang's powerful psychological quality. Once someone questioned or denied it, it would affect her performance. Therefore, she envied Bailey Hongzhuang. After seeing Bailey Hongzhuang's performance, The 4 hall masters were dumbfounded. The originally certain defeat had been completely rewritten because of Bailey Hongzhuang. Hall Master Qin, your hall's Bailey Hongzhuang is truly amazing. Isn't she hiding it too deeply? Azure Dragon Hall Master Yen Kaicheng's eyes were filled with surprise and joy. Previously, he did not receive news that Bailey Hongzhuang was going to participate in the alchemist competition. It turned out that Bailey Hongzhuang was a hidden trump card. Hall Master Qin, your Vermilion Bird Hall, has made a great contribution in this alchemist competition. White Tiger Hall Master Qiyinghan smiled. The entire Vermilion Bird Hall would reward this kind of contribution. However, at this moment they were truly happy. If it wasn't for Bailey Hongzhuang, they wouldn't even dare to imagine the failure today. Qin Ai's face was full of smiles, but there was a hint of guilt in her smile. He thought that the sect master had allowed Bailey Hongzhuang to go on stage just to train her. Who would have thought that Bailey Hongzhuang was actually an existence that turned the tide? Such a Bailey Hongzhuang was indeed worthy of being the granddaughter of the sovereign. Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing were also stupefied. Even they felt that this was an unbreakable array, but Bailey Hongzhuang actually managed to break it in such a short time. It was truly shocking. Yunxiao, our daughter is actually so powerful. Mu Lingbing couldn't help but whisper softly. If she hadn't seen it with her own eyes today, it would have been such a pity. Lan Yunxiao's eyes flickered with excitement, and his heart was surging with emotions. Such a Bailey Hongzhuang was so outstanding that it was unimaginable. When Bailey Hongzhuang was born, he wanted to nurture Bailey Hongzhuang into an outstanding person, but he simply didn't have the chance. However, without their nurturing, Bailey Hongzhuang was still able to grow into such an outstanding person. How could he not be excited? His daughter didn't fall into depression because of the persecution from back then, which was an indescribable comfort to him. Hongzhuang is destined to be the center of attention. Chapter 21-28. The nervousness on Di Baichen's face has disappeared and was replaced by a thick smile. Hongzhuang has given him a huge surprise. Even he would not be able to break out of this situation, but Hongzhuang was able to do it. She is such a mysterious woman. Ha ha! Situ Yen burst into laughter at the sight of this. The medicine sect had really gone for wool and come home shorn. Now, only Shangguan Yufeng was left in the medicine sect to hold on. The rest of the pill masters have been utterly defeated. All this while, he had always thought that he would do his best to fulfill Hongzhuang's wishes. However, he never thought that Bailey Hongzhuang would be able to turn the tide in such a disadvantageous situation. Gu Weisheng had schemed against him time and time again. This time, he had completely slapped him in the face. Sect Master Gu, it seems that your plan is not that great after all. The consequences of this backlash are not small at all. Situ Yen calmly mocked Gu Weisheng. He still remembered Gu Weisheng's arrogant face from just a second ago. Now, he naturally wants to return the favor to him. Gu Weisheng's expression has turned extremely ugly. His eyes were fixed firmly on Bailey Hongzhuang, and the malicious light in his eyes could not be concealed. They were supposed to win this situation without a doubt. However, because of an unexpected Bailey Hongzhuang, she had ruined everything. He had never expected such a situation to occur. The strangest thing was that even Situ Yen could only forcefully break through such a formation. However, Bailey Hongzhuang had been able to locate the formation's eye. This was an impossible task, yet Bailey Hongzhuang had managed to do it. Most importantly, even if she had found the formation's eye, her mental strength would not be able to fight against the combined mental strength of Shangguan Yufeng and the rest. This was why he believed that they would definitely win the alchemist competition this time. However, where on earth had the Tiangang sect managed to find such a strange person like Bailey Hongzhuang? For her to be able to find out about such an obscure matter, her mental strength must be abnormally powerful. How come he had never heard of such a person before? Gu Weisheng couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. No one would believe that he had failed miserably at such an easy task. Facing Situ Yan's ridicule, Gu Weisheng could only swallow his anger. Who asked Situ Yan to have the upper hand now? He could only swallow this grievance himself. After all, he had previously used these words to shut Situ Yan's mouth. However, he did not expect that it would be his turn so soon. If it weren't for this Bailey Hongzhuang, Tiangang's sect would definitely lose this time. Chu Qianyi and the other alchemists of Tiangang's sect also understood at this moment that the reason they were able to escape from that predicament was entirely because of Bailey Hongzhuang. At this moment, they were deeply grateful to Bailey Hongzhuang. If it wasn't for Bailey Hongzhuang, they would have definitely lost this time. In just a short period of time, Bailey Hongzhuang had already changed everyone's impression of her. At this moment, no one was unhappy with Bailey Hongzhuang anymore. On the contrary, it was Bailey Hongzhuang who had saved everyone's face. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Shangguan Yufeng, who was struggling in front of her. Although she was standing behind Shangguan Yufeng, she could still feel the hatred in Shangguan Yufeng's eyes. Those who are unjust are doomed to destruction. All of this was caused by Shangguan Yufeng and the rest. Chapter 21-29. Bailey Hongzhuang has always had only one way to deal with despicable people who use such despicable methods. Give them a taste of their own medicine. Then, Bailey Hongzhuang's lips slowly curled into a disdainful and playful angle. Soon after, Bailey Hongzhuang's mental energy gushed out once again in front of everyone's shocked eyes. Looking at Bailey Hongzhuang's actions, the faces of all the people present changed. Gu Weisheng's eyes were fixed firmly on Bailey Hongzhuang's body. Previously, Bailey Hongzhuang had completely destroyed the formation. What is she trying to do now? Gu Weisheng could faintly sense a bad premonition. This Bailey Hongzhuang is definitely not the type to stay still. Now, only Shangguan Yufeng's pill has not been destroyed among all the pill refiners in the Tiangang sect. He only needed a little more time to successfully refine this pill. However, Bailey Hongzhuang has suddenly made such a strange move. What kind of trouble is she trying to stir up? In contrast to Gu Weisheng's worries, Si Tian and the others were staring curiously at Bailey Hongzhuang. Now, they are no longer worried about Bailey Hongzhuang's abilities. They were only curious about the consequences of Bailey Hongzhuang's actions. Bailey Hongzhuang's mental energy spread across Chu Qianyi and the others' bodies as the crowd watched on anxiously and curiously. The cultivators from the medicine sect were shocked when they sensed the others' mental energy once again. However, after a careful examination, they realized that Bailey Hongzhuang's mental energy was peaceful and did not pose any threat to their mental energy. On the contrary, after their mental energy had merged with Bailey Hongzhuang's, their mental energy had become even more powerful and they could control the situation in the pill furnace with greater clarity. Chu Qianyi and the others' eyes lit up when they realized this. They never thought that Bailey Hongzhuang would help them in this way. With this kind of spiritual power, they could almost guarantee the success of refining the pills in the pill furnace. However, Shangguan Yufeng did not feel as good as Chu Qianyi and the others. Bailey Hongzhuang's array formation continued to attract his spiritual energy. This kind of attraction was much stronger than the array formation that they had used before. His mental strength had already been damaged before, and he was barely holding on. Now that something like this had happened, he couldn't hold on any longer. When Si Tian and the others saw Bailey Hongzhuang's actions, their hearts were already in turmoil. Who would have thought that Bailey Hongzhuang would be able to do this? It was simply too shocking. This kind of method was simply unheard of. However, the feeling of giving someone a taste of their own medicine was pretty good. Gu Weisheng looked at Bailey Hongzhuang as if he had seen a ghost. Even he had only seen Bailey Hongzhuang's formation in ancient books, but he didn't know how to use it. However, he had actually seen it on a member of the younger generation. She was actually able to use such a formation. This was simply too shocking. At this moment, Gu Weisheng understood that they would lose without a doubt. Bailey Hongzhuang was clearly well versed in this art. Furthermore, her abilities were on a higher level than Shangguan Yufeng and the others. They were no match for her at all. Junior sister Bailey is too domineering. This is simply unheard of. Junior sister Bailey must have been too low-key in the past. How could the young sect master's favorite be a mediocre person? Chapter 2130. The faces of the medicine sect's alchemists had turned into the color of a pig's liver. Yesterday, they still had the right to be arrogant, but today, they had become the target of everyone's ridicule. Under such circumstances, even if they wanted to maintain their arrogance, they could no longer do so. This feeling of humiliation had ceased to exist from the day they had become alchemists. However, today, in front of all the other sect's disciples, they had to relive it all over again. The culprit was Bailey Hongzhuang. Gu Fengyan stared furiously at Bailey Hongzhuang, and his heart was filled with fear. When the sect leader had first passed this method to them, they were simply shocked and felt that the other party had no other way out other than to fail under such circumstances. However, Bailey Hongzhuang was able to destroy it. At least, he couldn't do it. He couldn't do it at all. Bailey Hongzhuang's terrifying mental strength made one blush with shame. As compared to Bailey Hongzhuang's calm and collected face, he was even more shocked. This woman was so young and had not revealed her abilities, but she actually had such abilities. Just like what eldest senior brother had said, Bailey Hongzhuang was the real variable. This woman was as elegant as a lotus and had an outstanding temperament, just like a fairy who had descended to the mortal world. She was indeed not an ordinary person. This woman's status was probably higher than theirs. Previously, he had thought that Bailey Hongzhuang was probably here to train. Now that he had sensed Bailey Hongzhuang's mental strength, he felt that Bailey Hongzhuang's pill refining skills were definitely not bad. As an alchemist, he was well aware of the importance of mental strength to an alchemist. Even if Bailey Hongzhuang's pill refining skills were not powerful enough, her room for growth was absolutely shocking. His gaze fell upon Shangguan Yufeng, who was struggling to hold on. He understood that Shangguan Yufeng was already at the end of his rope and would not be able to hold on till the end. This time, all their plots had failed in Bailey Hongzhuang's hands. Chi! A soft sound was heard and Shangguan Yufeng's expression changed greatly. The sound of the pill being destroyed could be heard from the pill furnace. The smell of burnt flesh entered Shangguan Yufeng's nostrils. His face turned pale and ugly as if he could not accept this result. In the next moment, Shangguan Yufeng suddenly turned around and his gaze fell upon Bailey Hongzhuang. His eyes, which were filled with rage, glared fiercely at Bailey Hongzhuang as if they could not live under the same sky. This time, he had come with glory, and he would return with glory. However, he had been humiliated to the extreme. As the eldest senior brother of the medicine sect, he simply could not accept this outcome. Now that the pill had been destroyed, it was already too late. He had been completely defeated. He did not even have a chance to compete. If he had to be He-Tu-Tu to Bailey Hongzhuang, this was because he had absolute confidence in his alchemy skills. Even if Chu Qianyi succeeded, he might not be able to compete with him. However, everything has now been reduced to nothingness. There was no longer any possibility. Bailey Hongzhuang remained calm and collected as she faced Chu Qianyi's enraged and violent gaze. If the medicine sect had not done this first, she would not have given them a taste of their own medicine. Chapter 2131. The medicine sect's sect master, Gu Weisheng, has an extremely ugly look on his face. He has lost a great deal of face today. Many sects are aware of the medicine sect and Tiangang sect's alchemist competition, and I'm sure that everyone is concerned about the outcome. In terms of pill refinement skills, the medicine sect already had the upper hand in this aspect. However, they had lost under such circumstances. If news of this were to spread, their reputation would be completely ruined. At this moment, even Gu Weisheng himself did not know what to do. They had been completely wiped out. This result was simply too much of a slap in the face. Situ Yan's face carried a calm smile. Gu Weisheng had brought this upon himself. However, Hong Zhuang's actions have truly stunned him. If Hong Zhuang had not participated in the alchemist competition today, they would have been completely wiped out instead. He was not concerned about the medicine sect's reputation being completely ruined. The most important thing was that Tiangang's sect had achieved a complete victory. He would like to see if Gu Weisheng would dare to play dirty tricks on him in the future. Even though the medicine sect's alchemists had been completely wiped out, it was too late for them to refine pills again. Unless they were to refine low-grade pills, wouldn't that be a slap in the face as well? Hence, the medicine sect's alchemists could only stand on the spot and feel the crowd's disdainful stares. These stares were as uncomfortable as being pricked by needles. However, they could only endure it. Bailey Hongzhuang, Chu Qianyi, and the rest of the medicine sect's alchemists continued to refine their pills. They were almost done refining their pills. Once they have finished refining their pills, the alchemist competition would be over. After the time it takes for a joss stick to burn, a thick fragrance quietly filled the air. Upon smelling this fragrance, the cultivators present could not help but greedily take a deep breath. They felt refreshed. A smile appeared on Chu Qianyi's face. He had not disappointed his expectations and had managed to refine a pill. A grade 6 ice spirit pill. Initially, based on his level of power, there was a high chance of failure. However, with the help of Bailey Hongzhuang's mental energy, everything had gone smoothly. He was truly grateful to Bailey Hongzhuang. If it had not been for Bailey Hongzhuang, how could everything have been completed so smoothly? Shangguan Yufeng knew that Chu Qianyi had refined an ice spirit pill the moment he smelled the pill's fragrance. However, when Shangguan Yufeng found out about this, the anger in his heart grew even stronger. This was because the pill that he had refined was of a higher grade than the ice spirit pill. As long as he could refine the medicinal pill, then he would undoubtedly win this round. This sect's alchemist competition's loss in this competition. The medicine sect's medicine refiners were naturally able to tell as well. Their expressions had turned extremely ugly. If they had known that this would happen, they would have refined it properly. That way, such a problem would not have occurred. Annoyance of the medicine sect's heart pills sect's heart, alchemists. Gu Weisheng's eyes were sinister, and a feeling of regret sprouted in his heart. If they had known earlier, they could have easily won this battle. Soon after, another thick pill fragrance filled the air. This pill fragrance came from Bailey Hongzhuang's pill refining cauldron. Shangguan Yufeng and the others couldn't help but frown when they smelled this unfamiliar yet fresh scent. How come they had never smelled this kind of pill fragrance before? Chapter 2132. Could it be that Bailey Hongzhuang had refined an even higher grade pill? When this thought surfaced in Shangguan Yufeng's mind, he himself felt that it was somewhat inconceivable. How was this possible? Bailey Hongzhuang was only in her teens. If she was able to refine a 6th grade pill and above, then her innate talent was simply too terrifying. His innate talent was already known as a rare genius. Could it be that Bailey Hongzhuang was even more talented than him? After Gu Weisheng smelled this pill fragrance, he also frowned because he had never smelled this pill fragrance before. A look of suspicion surfaced in the eyes of the pill refinery hall's hall master, Sun Yin. He was extremely knowledgeable about pills, but he had never smelled this pill fragrance from the pill that Bailey Hongzhuang had refined. Hall Master Sun, do you know what kind of pill Bailey Hongzhuang had refined? Qin Ai asked with a smile. Ever since he had seen Bailey Hongzhuang's performance on the high stage, he had become even more curious about Bailey Hongzhuang. Now, he only felt that Bailey Hongzhuang's pill refinement skills were probably extremely outstanding. Otherwise, she would definitely not be able to do what she had done previously. That's right, Hall Master Sun. What kind of pill did Bailey Hongzhuang refine? Gu Jingqing asked curiously. Now that their Tiangang sect had won this alchemist competition, they could not help but pay attention to the grade of the pill that Bailey Hongzhuang had refined. I have never smelled this pill fragrance before. Sun Yin spoke out his thoughts. Once these words were spoken, the 4 hall masters were all stunned. They could only wonder if they had heard wrongly. Sun Yin's attainments in pill refinement were extremely terrifying. Even he did not know what Bailey Hongzhuang had refined. Immediately after, Sun Yin's next sentence made them even more astonished. This pill fragrance is very similar to the pill fragrance of the Return of Spring pill recorded in ancient book. However, the Return of Spring pill has been lost for many years. Furthermore, it belongs to the category of 6th grade pills, which are extremely difficult to refine. Sun Yin frowned slightly. He had a faint feeling that this medicinal pill was the rejuvenation pill. However, because it had been lost for too many years, he did not dare to believe it. Bailey Hongzhuang was so young, how could she have grasped the lost pill formula? Gu Weisheng suspiciously looked at Bailey Hongzhuang. This pill fragrance was very similar to the fragrance of the rejuvenation pill. Could Bailey Hongzhuang refine such a level of lost medicinal pill? One had to know that with Bailey Hongzhuang's age, wanting to concoct a 6th-tier pill was already an inconceivable matter. What's more, the rejuvenation pill's grade wasn't far from a 7th-grade pill. Refining lost medicinal pills was much more difficult than refining ordinary medicinal pills because there was no one to guide her. If Bailey Hongzhuang could really refine it, then this Bailey Hongzhuang's potential was too terrifying. I've heard that Chu Qianyi had refined the ice spirit pill. I wonder what kind of medicinal pill Bailey Hongzhuang had refined? I don't know, but I feel that Bailey Hongzhuang's medicinal pill shouldn't be of a low grade. Look, even the alchemy hall master is pondering. This time, Bailey Hongzhuang has really amazed the world with a single brilliant feat. The group of disciples looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with smiles on their faces. Now, they were no longer as nervous as before. Regardless of what kind of medicinal pill Bailey Hongzhuang had refined, they had already won this round of the alchemist competition. After Bailey Hongzhuang had successfully refined the medicinal pill, she stood quietly to one side and waited for the alchemist competition to end. Chapter 2133. After all the alchemists had finished refining their medicinal herbs, Second Elder Qiao Ying's voice rang out. Hall Master Sun and Elder Du, please inspect the results together. In order to ensure the fairness of this alchemist competition, Tiangang sect and Medicine sect had agreed to send one person each to inspect the results of the pill refinement. However, saying such words now was tantamount to another slap to Medicine sect's face. How was this inspecting the results of the disciples from both sides? It was clearly inspecting the results of Tiangang sect's disciples. Du Feiyang's expression was even more awkward and embarrassed. He originally thought that inspecting the results of the disciples at this time should be a very honorable thing to do. Who would have thought that it would be such a situation? Now that he had stepped up, it was really a slap to the face. However, this was something that had been agreed upon long ago. No matter how unwilling he was, it was meaningless. In the next moment, Sun Yin and Du Feiyang walked up to the high platform of the alchemist competition and inspected the pills refined by the disciples. Su Jin, Grade 5 Clear Heart Pill. Chen Yi, Grade 5 Shadowed Heaven Pill. One by one, the grades and names of the pills refined by the alchemists were read out. Although Tiangang sect was not known for pill refinement, Tiangang sect was a sect that developed in many aspects. Therefore, the results of the pill refinement hall had always been very good. Even Du Feiyang had to admit that Tiangang sect's strength was indeed not bad. A 5th-grade alchemist, this was already an extremely good level. As long as they continued to develop, their achievements in pill refinement would definitely not be simple in the future. As the Tiangang sect disciples listened to the Grade 5 pills one after another, their expressions were filled with pride. As Tiangang sect's disciples, they had always been proud. This time, medicine sect wanted to crush them in pill refinement but was crushed by them in the end. They felt even more elated. Gu Fengyan's eyes were filled with disdain. It's just grade 5 pills. Look at how proud they are. It's as if no one can refine it. If this problem did not occur, there would definitely be no problem with his pill refinement. However, now that he had to endure such humiliation, it was really infuriating. Shangguan Yufeng's face was ashen. Didn't you fail to refine it? Now that they had lost, no matter what they said, it would be a joke in the eyes of others. Since he was destined to be laughed at, he might as well speak less to avoid being caught by others. Hearing Shangguan Yufeng's words, the indignation on Gu Feng's face deepened, but he hesitated to speak. He refused to accept this. However, such a result was not convincing at all. As everyone knows, the medicine sect's pill refinement skills could be said to be peerless. Now, they have been defeated by a sect that specializes in cultivation. This was a great humiliation. None of them were willing to admit it. But now, he could only endure it. At this moment, Shangguan Yufeng only wanted to know what kind of pill Bailey Hongzhuang had concocted. Chu Qianyi was not his opponent. From the very beginning, he did not put Chu Qianyi in his eyes. What he cared about was Bailey Hongzhuang. From the moment Bailey Hongzhuang appeared, he already felt that Bailey Hongzhuang was extraordinary. Now, it could be seen that Bailey Hongzhuang was no ordinary person. Chapter 2134. He felt that Bailey Hongzhuang was definitely a formidable opponent. Every part of her was extraordinary. Most importantly, he could not determine the type of pill that Bailey Hongzhuang had refined. Du Feiyang and Sun Yin slowly walked in front of Chu Qianyi. Sun Yin then picked up the white porcelain bottle that had been placed in front of Chu Qianyi. When he saw the pill inside, his face couldn't help but reveal a satisfied smile. Chu Qianyi had always been a disciple that he was proud of. At such a young age, he had already become a grade 6 alchemist, and his character was also very good. As long as he was properly nurtured, he would definitely become a disciple who could hold his own in the pill refinery hall. Within the white porcelain bottle was a grade 6 ice spirit pill. It had been refined very well, and there were no flaws at all. It was very satisfying. After Du Feiyang had inspected it, he did not have any objections. Following that, Sun Yin announced the final result. Chu Qianyi, grade 6 ice spirit pill. When the words grade 6 ice spirit pill were announced, the disciples of Tiangang sect burst into cries of surprise. Although a grade 6 pill and a grade 5 pill seemed to only have a difference of 1 grade, pill refinement skills were the same as cultivation. The further one progressed, the more difficult it was to raise one's grade. The difference between a grade 6 pill and a grade 5 pill was just as great. The price was also doubled. Chu Qianyi had refined a grade 6 pill. This result was extremely outstanding no matter where one went. Chu Qianyi's face was filled with a joyful smile. Originally, because of this alchemist competition, his heart was under immense pressure. He was afraid that he had let down the palace lord's heavy responsibility. If he had made a mistake in his performance, the entire Tiangang sect would be humiliated. Hence, he had not been able to rest properly for the past few days. Fortunately, the final result was extremely good. Fortunately, he had managed to hold on. Finally, Sun Yin and Du Feiyang walked in front of Bailey Hongzhuang. In reality, before the start of this alchemist competition, they did not have any understanding of Bailey Hongzhuang at all. Sun Yin only knew that Bailey Hongzhuang was the young sect master's sweetheart and had obtained first place in the assessment. Other than that, he did not know anything else. Hence, he only knew that Bailey Hongzhuang had a certain amount of talent in cultivation, but it had nothing to do with the alchemy hall. However, after what had happened, he no longer felt that way. Originally, he should have checked the pills refined by Bailey Hongzhuang before going to see Chu Qianyi. After all, Chu Qianyi was the most promising person in the competition. However, under such circumstances, Sun Yin had a faint premonition that Bailey Hongzhuang might be the final character. Du Feiyang wasn't dissatisfied with Sun Yin's arrangement because even he felt that Bailey Hongzhuang was the most important person in this alchemist competition. Sun Yin and Chu Qianyi slowly walked to Bailey Hongzhuang and stopped in front of Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang just stood there quietly with an elegant smile on her face. Du Feiyang took the lead and picked up the white porcelain bottle in front of Bailey Hongzhuang. He had long been curious about the pills refined by Bailey Hongzhuang. Based on Bailey Hongzhuang's age, it was simply inconceivable for her to be able to refine pills of a very high grade. However, based on Bailey Hongzhuang's display of mental energy, her pill refining skills were definitely not bad. Hence, this was an extremely contradictory situation. Chapter 2135. This was because he had never seen this pill before. As an elder of the medicine sect, he had seen countless pills and knew them like the back of his hand. However, he had never seen this pill before. Du Feiyang was certain that this pill was not of a low grade as he smelled the refreshing pill fragrance. Could it be that there was a pill that he had never seen before? Du Feiyang continued to ponder as he handed the white porcelain bottle over to Sun Yin. Sun Yin took the pill and examined it carefully. Previously, he had felt that Bailey Hongzhuang had most likely refined the long-lost spring return pill. Now that he had seen it, he felt that it was very likely to be the same as his judgment. However, he had only seen the records in the ancient books and had never seen the spring return pill with his own eyes. Therefore, he could not give a definite answer. "Hallmaster Sun, what pill is this?" Du Feiyang slowly asked. The medicine sect had already lost all face in the alchemist competition, so he did not mind asking again. Pretending to know when he did not know would only invite more ridicule. Following Du Feiyang's words, everyone present was stunned for a moment. Bailey Hongzhuang had stolen the limelight in the alchemist competition. Everyone was curious as to what pill she had refined. However, even an elder of the medicine sect did not know what pill it was. Wasn't this a little too shocking? Shangguan Yufeng seemed to understand when he heard Du Feiyang's question. It was no wonder that he could not tell. Since even an elder could not tell, it was normal for him to not be able to tell. It was not because he was not skilled enough. Chu Qianyi's gaze also fell upon Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang had helped him so much previously. He had a good impression of Bailey Hongzhuang. Sun Yin smiled when he heard Du Feiyang's question. "Actually, I can't confirm my judgment either." Saying this, Sun Yin couldn't help but look at Bailey Hongzhuang, his smile kind and amiable. "I don't know if this is the long-lost rejuvenation pill?" When Sun Yin asked this question, Gu Weisheng's gaze was also fixed on Bailey Hongzhuang. His thoughts were exactly the same as Sun Yin's because this situation was too similar to what had been written in the ancient book. Bailey Hongzhuang gently nodded and her expression was filled with admiration. "That's right, it is the spring return pill." This was the first time she had met the Hall Master of the Alchemy Palace. Based on her knowledge, the spring return pill had disappeared from the Shengxian continent for many years. She never thought that Hall Master Sun Yin's judgment based on the pill's fragrance when refining the pill. It was truly incredible. As the voice of Bailey Hongzhuang fell, the eyes of everyone present changed a bit. "Isn't this too amazing? I never thought that Bailey Hongzhuang would be so secretive. It's simply too amazing. I'm really impressed by Bailey Hongzhuang. She's always kept a low profile." At this moment, the Tiangang sect disciples' feelings for Bailey Hongzhuang had turned into worship. Bailey Hongzhuang was undoubtedly the youngest disciple to participate in the alchemist competition. Chapter 2136. Wow, boss is really too cool. Yuan Xiaoman's face was full of excitement. She always knew that boss was a very amazing existence, but today's amazing feat really made people feel happy. Boss's ability is simply amazing. Now the disciples of Tiangang's sect have completely changed their view of her. Yuan Jixin couldn't help but give a thumbs up. Bailey Hongzhuang was really a legendary figure. It was obviously something impossible, but she could do it. It was really amazing. Xia Zhiqing and the others had no other thoughts at the moment except to worship her. For a long time, they had been immersed in the shock brought to them by Bailey Hongzhuang, and now they admired her even more. Shangguan Yufeng's eyes suddenly condensed. He had naturally heard of the name of the rejuvenation pill, but he didn't expect to see Bailey Hongzhuang refining it today. If there was still arrogance in his heart before, at this moment, that arrogance had gradually dissipated. The pill he refined could defeat the ice spirit pill refined by Chu Qianni, but it couldn't defeat the rejuvenation pill refined by Bailey Hongzhuang. At this moment, Shangguan Yufeng understood that they didn't lose this competition unjustly. Even if the previous incident didn't happen, even if his pill was successfully refined, the final winner would still be Bailey Hongzhuang. He was not her opponent. Gu Fengyan, who was originally dissatisfied, could no longer say anything at this moment. Bailey Hongzhuang's strength was enough to shut him up. How is this possible? Gu Fengyan only felt that it was hard to believe. Bailey Hongzhuang looked like she was in her teens. How could she refine such a high-level pill? He had always felt that his talent in alchemy was good, but he was still a little lacking compared to his senior brother. But now that he had seen Bailey Hongzhuang, his sense of superiority had disappeared. Bailey Hongzhuang was the real genius. Gu Weisheng's eyes also changed. Such a young sixth-grade alchemist, her future was limitless. When did Tiangang's sect recruit such a good seedling? He didn't know anything. As the gathering place for pill masters, the medicine sect paid the most attention to genius pill masters. But such a genius alchemist, they actually did not receive any news at all and was poached away by the Heavenly Dipper sect just like that? This was simply inconceivable. He could imagine that if the medicine sect managed to recruit Bailey Hongzhuang, with Bailey Hongzhuang and Shangguan Yufeng, which sect would be able to compete with them in pill refinement? What's more, Bailey Hongzhuang actually grasped the pill formula of a long-lost pill. Although the rejuvenation pill was not a pill that could aid in cultivation, it was still very attractive to cultivators. As long as they took one pill, they would be able to return to their youthful appearance. Who wouldn't want that? A woman's desire was something that even a man couldn't avoid. This was a huge fortune. At this moment, Gu Weisheng's heart could not help but become active. If I can recruit Bailey Hongzhuang into the medicine sect, that would be great. Bailey Hongzhuang, Grade 6 Rejuvenation Pill. Next, I announce that the first place of this year's alchemist competition is Tiangang sect's Bailey Hongzhuang. Following Sun Yin's words, the Tiangang sect disciples present burst into exclamations. Wow, this was truly an exciting piece of news. Chapter 2137. They did not want to miss out on anything related to Bailey Hongzhuang, but they never thought that Bailey Hongzhuang would have such a stunning performance in the Pill Master competition. It seems that their daughter had kept a very low profile. She clearly has such great talent, yet she has never mentioned it. Based on Bailey Hongzhuang's age, it was rare for someone to be able to keep such a low profile. Compared to Lan Qingyan's arrogance and haughtiness, Bailey Hongzhuang was much better. Mu Lingbing's heart was filled with complacency. Yu Manlan had thought that she would be able to destroy everything, but her hopes had never been destroyed. On the contrary, she now felt an indescribable sense of pride. Di Beichen's face was filled with a gentle and intoxicated smile. No one could compare to his Hongzhuang. Regardless of the circumstances, her grace was enough to make anyone fall head over heels for her. Haha, Sect Master Gu, we've come out on top this time. Situ Yen laughed heartily. He was already very happy to have been able to achieve such a victory. Besides, the one who had achieved this victory was his maternal granddaughter. He had always known that Bailey Hongzhuang's talent in cultivation was not bad, but he never thought that Bailey Hongzhuang's attainments in pill refinement would be even more stunning and peerless. This had given him a huge surprise. Compared to the current situation, he only felt that everything was quickly changing for the better. Gu Weisheng's face was as black as the bottom of a pot as he stared at Sidu Yan's radiant smile. This slap in the face was a great humiliation to him. However, he, who should not have been here, had still come. He could already imagine the mocking laughter of the other organizations when they find out about this. This time, the medicine sect had really gotten off to a bad start. Gu Weisheng's gaze fell upon Bailey Hongzhuang. When he returns, he must investigate Bailey Hongzhuang's identity. If he has the chance, he must work hard to recruit Bailey Hongzhuang into the medicine sect. If they were to miss out on such a genius pill refiner, it would be a reckless waste of God's gift. Let's go. Gu Weisheng suddenly stood up and looked at Shangguan Yufeng and the others with an ashen face. He turned around and walked towards the Tiangang sect's mountain gate. Today they had completely lost face. The reason why they had stayed was because the alchemist competition hadn't ended yet. If they left just like that, it would be too ungentlemanly. Now that the alchemist competition was over, there was no need for them to stay here and be ridiculed by the crowd. After hearing Gu Weisheng's words, Shangguan Yufeng and the rest of the disciples followed him. In fact, they had long wanted to leave. Staying here for even a second longer made them feel like they were sitting on pins and needles. Now that they had the chance to leave, they felt as if they had been granted amnesty. Du Feiyang and Yao Xinghuai also hurriedly followed. This time, they had lost all face, and the following matters would be the most troublesome to deal with. At the very least, the label of the medicine sect cannot be removed for the time being. Si Tu-yen did not react to Gu Weisheng's departure. He only watched quietly as Gu Weisheng left. In this match, Tiangang sect won a complete victory. He believed that in the future, Gu Weisheng would not easily set a trap for him. After all, no one was willing to go for wool and come home shorn. Chapter 2138. Bailey Hongzhuang put away the pills and pill cauldron before slowly walking back to the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall's team. The alchemist competition had ended and the alchemist assessment was next. When Qin Ai saw Bailey Hongzhuang walking back to the team, she quietly nodded at Bailey Hongzhuang. Her face was full of praise. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly and walked back to her seat. Everyone's eyes could not help but follow Bailey Hongzhuang. At this moment, everyone felt that Bailey Hongzhuang's entire body was surrounded by a dazzling halo. Today, Bailey Hongzhuang was the Tiangang sect's hero. Chu Qianyi and the other alchemists also walked back to their seats in the pill refinement hall. However, Bailey Hongzhuang's previous results had given them too much of a shock. Chu Qianyi could not help but look at Bailey Hongzhuang. He simply could not believe that Bailey Hongzhuang did not stay in the pill refinement hall and had run off to the cultivation hall. What was Bailey Hongzhuang thinking? If Bailey Hongzhuang was willing to come to the pill refinement hall, he was willing to give up his position as the #1 alchemist to Bailey Hongzhuang. Such a position was meant for those who were capable to occupy it. He had always thought highly of himself. His talent was outstanding and he was hard-working. Regardless of whether it was the elders or the palace master, they all admired him. No one in the entire pill refinement hall was a match for him. He felt that he was the most outstanding genius alchemist. However, after witnessing Bailey Hongzhuang's talent and power, he realized that there was always someone better out there. She was able to refine a level 6 pill at such a young age. Her mental energy was even more shocking. He knew very well that this kind of mental energy was like adding wings to a tiger for Bailey Hongzhuang. The other disciples in the pill refinement hall could only gasp in admiration of Bailey Hongzhuang. Her mental energy was beyond their reach. Sun Yin slowly walked to Qin Ai's side. His usually calm face was now filled with anxiety. Palace Master Qin, Your palace has such an outstanding genius alchemist, yet you've kept her a secret. Isn't this too much? Sun Yin stared at Bailey Hongzhuang in dissatisfaction. If it had not been for the alchemist competition today, he would not have known that Bailey Hongzhuang was such an outstanding alchemist. Such an outstanding alchemist had not stayed in the pill refinement hall to study and had actually gone to the cultivation hall to cultivate. What a waste of God's gift! The eyes of Yan Kaiqing and the others also fell on Qin Ai. They did not know that Bailey Hongzhuang had such a talent before. Sun Yin was in a daze. Sun Yin was was on. His on. Sun Yin. And Sun Yin's on's face. On Sun Yin assess. Palace Master Qin, since you've found out about this, you should let Bailey Hongzhuang come to the pill refinement hall to cultivate. If you let such an outstanding alchemist seedling cultivate, wouldn't that be a waste of her talent? Sun Yin's expression was serious. After all, the chances of a genius alchemist appearing were much lower than the chances of a genius cultivator appearing. As long as an alchemist's pill refinement skills were powerful enough, they could recruit some cultivators to serve them in the future. This was a profession with limitless potential. After witnessing Bailey Hongzhuang's talent and power today, he had made up his mind. He must recruit Bailey Hongzhuang to the pill refinement hall no matter what. Chapter 2139. Actually, when Qin Ai had seen Sun Yin approaching, he knew that Sun Yin must be here to poach her. Bailey Hongzhuang's performance was so outstanding that it was even more impressive than Chu Qianyi, whom Sun Yin had always treated as a treasure. It would be strange if Sun Yin, this old fellow, was not jealous. Besides, Bailey Hongzhuang was still young and her mental energy was strong. Her talent was definitely one level above Chu Qianyi's. However, Bailey Hongzhuang was also a genius of their palace. He could not allow Sun Yin to poach Bailey Hongzhuang away just like that. Back then, Bailey Hongzhuang had volunteered to join the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. As the palace master of the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall, he had witnessed the improvement of Bailey Hongzhuang's powers. If Sun Yin were to poach her away just like that, how could he continue to show his face? Palace Master Sun, you're wrong. Bailey Hongzhuang is the champion of the assessment competition. It can be seen that her talent in cultivation is not inferior to her talent in pill refinement. Qin Ai hurriedly expressed his opinion. Even if he did not accept Bailey Hongzhuang's identity as the sect master's granddaughter, just Bailey Hongzhuang's talent in cultivation alone was enough to make her worthy of being recruited. He had to admit defeat. Without the sect master's nurturing, Bailey Hongzhuang had relied on her own abilities to reach this stage. Her talent was truly shocking. One should know that in the past, Bailey Hongzhuang did not have the support of abundant cultivation resources. He simply could not imagine that if Bailey Hongzhuang had had sufficient resources in the beginning, she would have grown to such a shocking state. Yan Kaiqing and the rest were shocked when they heard Qin Ai's words. Just as Qin Ai had said, Bailey Hongzhuang had entered the Tiangang sect with extremely outstanding results. She had not relied on her pill refinement skills to obtain first place in the assessment competition. Instead, she had relied on her own abilities as a cultivator. Sun Yin was slightly shocked. He had previously forgotten about this, because Bailey Hongzhuang's talent in pill refining was simply too stunning. Even if Bailey Hongzhuang's talent in cultivation is very good, her development in alchemy is more promising. Sun Yin had always been a person who loved talent. With such a good seedling, if he didn't have any achievements in alchemy, it would really be a pity. Qin Ai's expression also revealed some difficulty. Previously, he completely did not know that Bailey Hongzhuang had such shocking attainments in alchemy. Logically speaking, most people would only do their best to develop what they were best at. After all, everyone's energy was limited. Rather than working in both areas at the same time and failing to achieve good results in either, It was better to focus on one area and achieve greater result. But who would have thought that a freak like Bailey Hongzhuang would appear? Whether it was alchemy or cultivation, she could develop to such a level. Hall Master Sun, I think we should report this matter to the sect master. Qin Ai and Sun Yin had known each other for such a long time, so he understood Sun Yin's character very well. Once this fellow had set his eyes on a talent, he would definitely pester that person to death and would definitely not leave the matter at that. Bailey Hongzhuang was the sect master's maternal granddaughter. It would be best to report this matter to the sect master and let him make the decision. Based on the sect master's love for Bailey Hongzhuang, he would definitely follow Bailey Hongzhuang's wishes. Bailey Hongzhuang was the eldest young lady of the Tiangang sect. Naturally, she could do whatever she wanted. Seeing that Qin Ai did not have any stance of refusing to let go of Bailey Hongzhuang, Sun Yin felt relieved. Chapter 2140. Usually, such matters could be discussed and decided amongst the palace masters. Of course, they would need to seek Bailey Hongzhuang's opinion. However, there was no need to report such matters to the sect master. He never thought that Qin Ai would actually make such a suggestion. After careful consideration, Sun Yin felt that it was probably because of Bailey Hongzhuang's special status, which was why Qin Ai had made such a decision. After all, Bailey Hongzhuang was the young sect master's sweetheart, and she had been given preferential treatment in Tiangang sect. All right, we shall meet the sect master tomorrow. Sun Yin's face revealed a satisfied smile. No matter who it was, between cultivators and alchemists, they would choose to be alchemists. Only because the conditions to become an alchemist were simply too harsh, and it was much easier to become a cultivator. He believed that Bailey Hongzhuang would definitely like pill refining skills as well. Otherwise, based on Bailey Hongzhuang's age, if she hadn't spent enough effort on pill refining skills, no matter how shocking her innate talent was, it would be impossible for her to achieve such results. Qin Ai and Sun Yin's conversation was not veiled, hence some of the disciples, who were standing very close to them, could hear it clearly. Instantly, the crowd did not only admire Bailey Hongzhuang, they were even more envious. Two palace masters were fighting over Bailey Hongzhuang. What a great honor this was! If it were them, it would be extremely difficult for them to get familiar with the palace masters, not to mention for the palace masters to recruit them. However, at this moment, even though everyone was envious, they did not have any words of jealousy like before. In the past, they had always felt that the reason why Bailey Hongzhuang was able to receive preferential treatment was entirely because of her relationship with the young sect master. However, everything that had happened today made them understand that Bailey Hongzhuang had relied on her own abilities to obtain this. Hence, they had no reason to be jealous. If they had the same strength as Bailey Hongzhuang, then they would be the ones being fought over right now. This time, Bailey Hongzhuang has really struck it rich. The only thing is, we don't know if she will go to the Pill Refining Hall or stay in the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. In my opinion, he's most likely going to the Alchemy Hall. The resources available to the disciples of the Alchemy Hall are much more abundant than ours. Moreover, with Bailey Hongzhuang's pill refining skills, if she were to go to the Pill Refining Hall, she would be the #1 existence. I don't think so. If Bailey Hongzhuang wanted to go to the Alchemy Hall, she would have gone there long ago. Why would she wait until now? There was a lot of discussion among the disciples. Now Bailey Hongzhuang was a famous figure in Tiangang sect. Everyone was very curious about what choice Bailey Hongzhuang would make. Bailey Hongzhuang was standing at the back of the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall team. She wasn't too clear about what was happening in front of her. Hongzhuang, you're amazing. Xia Jiqing gave a thumbs up to Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang was too domineering when she turned the tide. Bai Junyu also gave a thumbs up, his face flashing with heartfelt admiration. Hongzhuang, if it weren't for you today, I'm afraid that Tiangang sect would have lost a lot of face. Just as Xia Jiqing and Bai Junyu were talking, a group of disciples around Bailey Hongzhuang also echoed. Junior Sister Bailey, your performance today is really amazing. You saved the dignity of our Tiangang sect. In the future, the disciples of the medicine sect can no longer be arrogant in front of us. Chapter 2141. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the kind smiles on the faces of the disciples around her, and a smile also appeared on her beautiful face. The friendship in the sect was so simple and pure. When you proved your strength and even saved everyone's dignity, everyone's prejudice against you would disappear. If it was outside, everything would not be so simple. The alchemist assessment soon began. Lu Qinyue and the other alchemists, who wanted to become disciples of the Alchemy Hall, had already walked up to the high platform. Situyen, Di Baichen, and the rest had already left. Previously, it was a contest between the Tiangang sect and the medicine sect, so they naturally had to be present. As for the alchemist assessment, they obviously would not waste time to pay attention to it. Although Lu Qinyue and the rest knew where the problems were, they were still a little disappointed when they saw Situyen and the rest leave just like that. However, no matter what, being able to see the sect master and young sect master on their first visit to the Tiangang sect was already an honor that many people had never had before. After the soul-stirring alchemist competition, the alchemist assessment was obviously not that eye-catching. Many disciples from the branch halls chose to leave. After all, the process of refining pills was really long. They had already stayed here for so long, and now they had to continue staying here. It was really uncomfortable. In fact, the alchemist assessment was originally the Alchemy Hall's matter. The disciples from the 4 major branch halls were all here to join in the fun. In the previous years, only a small number of cultivators would come to watch the fun. It was impossible for a large number of people to gather here today. The disciples from the Alchemy Hall still stayed where they were. Every alchemist assessment determined what kind of fresh blood they could recruit. Other than the disciples from the Alchemy Hall, Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest also did not leave. After all, Lu Qinyue was participating in the assessment. As Lu Qinyue's old friends, they had to support her. After many disciples left, Lu Qinyue naturally saw Gong Shaoqing's figure. The moment she saw Gong Shaoqing, Lu Qinyue's face revealed deep longing and joy. Ever since Gong Shaoqing went to the Tiangang sect, she had done her best to improve her alchemy skills so that she could stay in the Tiangang sect with Gong Shaoqing. She was still confident about today's assessment. Lu Qinyue's performance in this alchemist assessment was extremely outstanding. Not only Lu Qinyue, but there were also several very outstanding alchemists. The Alchemy Hall appeared to be very happy. There was a certain level of competition between the various halls of the Tiangang sect. Although the competition in the Pill Refinement Hall was not as intense as the other 4 halls, they still had to increase their influence. Most importantly, during the exchange between the sects, they must not drop the ball. The remaining alchemists were naturally extremely happy, but there were also some alchemists who were eliminated. These alchemists could only leave Tiangang sect with a depressed and unwilling face. For such a large force, the selection process was extremely cruel. As long as one's strength was insufficient, there was absolutely no possibility of continuing to stay. Lu Qinyue originally wanted to communicate with Gong Shaoqing and the others, but the disciples of the Alchemy Hall had already led them to the Alchemy Hall. Obviously, there was no chance to speak for the time being. Chapter 2142. Shaoqing, you can rest assured that Lu Qinyue has become a disciple of Tiangang sect. Yuan Jixin looked at Gong Shaoqing with a smile. He had already learned about Lu Qinyue from Dongfang Yu and the others. Today, seeing her, Lu Qinyue was really an outstanding person. In my opinion, it's not that simple. Lu Qinyue is a great beauty. In a place like Tiangang sect where disciples gather, I don't know how many people have their eyes on her. Shaoqing, I think you should take advantage of her. Yuan Shaoman pretended to be mature and patted Gong Shaoqing's shoulder. She had been in Tiangang sect for so long and knew this very well. As Yuan Shaoman said, whether it was Yuan Shaoman or Xia Jiqing, they both had pursuers in Tiangang sect, not to mention that Lu Qinyue's appearance was even more outstanding. Of course, the reason why no one pursued Bailey Hongzhuang was because no one dared to pursue her. Daring to steal the young sect master's woman, wasn't that courting death? It was precisely because of this that Bailey Hongzhuang saved a lot of trouble. Gong Shaoqing was still silent and didn't speak. It was really difficult to judge his real thoughts from his expressionless face. Looking at the people gathered together, Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and said, "I'll go back first." Hearing this, everyone nodded. Bailey Hongzhuang had such an amazing move in the alchemist competition today. They didn't know whether Bailey Hongzhuang was affected or not. After all, refining pills was something that consumed a lot of mental energy. Before, Bailey Hongzhuang had stayed here because of loyalty. Now that things had been settled, Bailey Hongzhuang should go back and have a good rest. "Boss, you have to go back and have a good rest," Yuan Shaoman said with concern. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. "I'm fine, don't worry." When Bailey Hongzhuang returned to the sect master's palace, she found Si Tuyen, Lan Yunxiao, Mu Lingbing, and Di Beichen waiting for her in the courtyard. Seeing this scene, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but reveal a hint of surprise in her eyes. "Are you waiting for me?" Bailey Hongzhuang asked. Si Tuyen and the others nodded slightly. Bailey Hongzhuang's performance today was beyond their expectations. Naturally, they had to get to know her better. "Hongzhuang, your performance today was too amazing. You gave us a big fright." Mu Lingbing's face was full of smiles. If she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, she wouldn't have believed it. "Hongzhuang, I didn't know that you had such amazing attainments in alchemy." Sidu Yan's voice was a bit emotional. Before, he just wanted to spoil Bailey Hongzhuang, so he didn't ask anything. Who would have thought that Bailey Hongzhuang would give him such a big surprise? Bailey Hongzhuang felt a surge of warmth in her heart when she saw how worried and happy Si Tuyen and the others were. Everyone trusted her so much. Previously, they didn't know how talented she was in alchemy and just let her do as she pleased. Just this point alone was enough to prove everyone's trust and pampering for her. "Grandfather, my alchemy skills have always been pretty good." Bailey Hongzhuang was full of smiles as she slowly walked over to sit beside Si Tuyen and the others. "Since your alchemy skills are so outstanding, why didn't you go to the alchemy hall earlier?" Chapter 2143. To me, the most important thing is to raise my own strength. Alchemy is only one of the things I'm interested in. Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled into a faint smile. She had always thought this through clearly. What she cared about the most was raising her own cultivation. Only with enough strength would she be truly powerful. Only with enough strength would she be able to protect the people she loved. She had a wide range of interests and hobbies. She was very interested in many things, but those were all methods to aid her cultivation. After she became an alchemist, she no longer needed to seek alchemists for pills. Moreover, her identity as an alchemist brought her great convenience. Thus, she had always ensured her own strength before diligently practicing alchemy. All of this was under the premise of ensuring that he could cultivate properly. Letting her only be an alchemist, this was not what she wanted. In Bailey Hongzhuang's life philosophy, she wanted to travel north and south, to go to many places. Once she became an alchemist, her ability to protect herself wouldn't be strong. She could only rely on recruiting cultivators to protect herself. In this way, it wouldn't be convenient for her to go anywhere. This wasn't what she wanted. Interest. One aspect. When Si Tuyen and the others heard Bailey Hongzhuang's words, they were speechless. This kind of genius alchemist had defeated the alchemists from the medicine sect and Tiangang sect who had devoted themselves to studying alchemy. Now, she actually said that alchemy was only one of the things she was interested in. How were the other alchemists supposed to live? So many years of hard work had all been fed to the dogs. She had obtained such results just by being interested. How were they supposed to endure this? Fortunately, the alchemy hall's disciples weren't here. Otherwise, they would have vomited blood after hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Mu Lingbing and Lan Yunxiao's gazes changed. If Bailey Hongzhuang was only interested in alchemy, how could she have become a 6th-grade alchemist at such a young age? In their opinion, the reason why Bailey Hongzhuang chose to major in alchemy was because she had yet to take revenge. If she was only an alchemist, it clearly wasn't enough. At this thought, Mu Lingbing and Lan Yunxiao both felt guilty. Originally, they should have given Bailey Hongzhuang a relaxing environment to grow up in. But, not only did they not give her anything, on the contrary, Bailey Hongzhuang had to endure everything. In fact, she could not even walk the path that she liked. However, the two of them didn't say anything. Bailey Hongzhuang was so sensible that she definitely didn't want them to be sad. Their debt to Bailey Hongzhuang could only be repaid in the future. Hall Master Sun really wants you to go to the alchemy hall, Situ Yen said with a faint smile. Previously, when Sun Yin went to look for Qin Ai, he had noticed it. However, with Sun Yin's character, his actions were within his expectations. Sun Yin was absolutely someone who loved talent. As long as he encountered talented alchemists, then he would pursue them relentlessly. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. Although I am interested in alchemy, the most important thing is still cultivation. To her, improving in both areas wasn't a problem at all. Her energy was originally very vigorous. Moreover, with the existence of the desert world, her time had greatly increased. It wasn't a problem for her to take care of both. Chapter 2144. He had wanted to sound out Bailey Hongzhuang's thoughts. If Bailey Hongzhuang was interested in pill refinement, she could join the pill refinement hall. However, Bailey Hongzhuang's attitude was very firm. She prioritized cultivation. In reality, Bailey Hongzhuang had developed very well in every aspect. She was a genius filled with potential. Since Bailey Hongzhuang had already made her decision, he naturally would not change her mind. He believed that Bailey Hongzhuang was interested in pill refinement. However, between the two of them, Bailey Hongzhuang was more interested in raising her cultivation. Yishuan, what method did the medicine sect use today? How did you manage to break it? Lan Yunxiao stared at Bailey Hongzhuang in astonishment. Bailey Hongzhuang's actions today were truly shocking. They were extremely shocked by what they had seen, but they could only roughly guess what method the medicine sect had used. However, they did not know the details. Si Tuyen and Di Beichen stared at Bailey Hongzhuang in confusion. They had never encountered such a situation before. If Bailey Hongzhuang had not managed to break it, the medicine sect would have achieved a great victory this time. This time, it could be said that Gu Weisheng had calculated everything, but he had overlooked Bailey Hongzhuang. In the previous situation, even Si Tuyen was at his wits' end. The medicine sect had used a formation to gather the mental energy of all the pill refiners together. This way, the pill refiners' mental energy would grow stronger and increase the success rate of pill refinement. However, the mental energy of the pill refiners who do not belong to them would be affected by their mental energy. As a result, their mental energy would become unstable and they would not be able to control the situation in the pill cauldron. Thinking about it, the medicine sect must have planned this for a long time. They must have practiced this many times. As a pill refiner, Bailey Hongzhuang had a good understanding of this field. If this was the first time they had used it, the chances of failure would be very high. After all, every alchemist's mental strength was different. Now that they had to gather together, as long as there was a trace of distrust, it would lead to failure. However, looking at the situation of the medicine sect pharmacists today, it was obvious that they were extremely proficient in this. Only after practicing many times would they be able to achieve such result. Once they heard Bailey Hongzhuang's explanation, Si Tuyen and the others finally understood the situation. The hatred in their hearts towards the medicine sect grew even stronger. Situ Yen felt that Tiangang sect should treat the medicine sect as their enemy. The medicine sect had provoked them time and time again. This time, they had even come up with such a despicable method. They were simply trying to completely destroy Tiangang sect's reputation. Although the two sects were not on good terms, they would not make it too obvious. After all, it was better to leave some leeway behind so that they could meet each other in the future. Everyone had such thoughts. However, the medicine sect has already gone overboard this time. If he were to act as if nothing had happened, wouldn't that mean that he, Situ Yen, was a coward? They had used all sorts of methods to practice so many times just to ensure that they would fail. How abominable! Hong Zhuang, what you did after that was to break the eye of the formation? Di Baichen asked. Bailey Hong Zhuang gently nodded. This kind of formation always has a weakness. As long as we can find it, it's not difficult to break it. Daughter, how do you know all this? Chapter 2145. Not only Mu Lingbing, but Si Tuyen and the others also had the same thought. Since Gu Weisheng had done this, it was obvious that he was certain they wouldn't be able to find a solution. He didn't know where Gu Weisheng had obtained this method, but it must have taken a lot of time. As the sect master of the medicine sect, Gu Weisheng's alchemy skills were outstanding. Anything related to alchemy, Gu Weisheng knew about it. Thus, it wasn't strange for Gu Weisheng to know about it, no matter how obscure it was. However, Bailey Hongzhuang also knew about it. This was too strange. Bailey Hongzhuang was startled. Previously, she only knew that this method was obscure, but now it seemed that it was too obscure. I usually like to read ancient books. When I first saw this array, I thought it was very mystical because I had never seen an alchemist use this method to refine pills. Thus, I paid special attention to it. At that time, I only read it as an interesting anecdote. I didn't expect it to really appear in front of me. I used the method recorded in the ancient book to break this array. It seems that reading more books has its benefits. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled to herself. It seemed that it wasn't easy to cover up a lie. Si Tuyen, Mu Lingbing, and Lan Yunxiao didn't doubt Bailey Hongzhuang's explanation. In reality, this kind of thing could only be recorded in ancient books. It was impossible to know about it anywhere else. Only Di Baichen had some understanding. This was probably Bailey Hongzhuang's experience from her previous life. Otherwise, how could Bailey Hongzhuang have broken the array so easily with just a few sentences in the ancient book? Now that the alchemist competition has been perfectly resolved, should we head to Tiangang sect tomorrow? Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes shone brightly. Grandmother's matter had always been their greatest concern. Previously, they couldn't go because of the competition. Now that the matter was resolved, they should hurry and take a look. Following Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Mu Lingbing and the others' eyes brightened. The earlier they went, the earlier they could understand the situation. Although everyone had a bad premonition in their hearts, they would find out sooner or later, so they naturally had to find out. That's right, we'll set off tomorrow, Si Tuyen said decisively. His voice was deep and firm. He had been waiting for this day for many years. It was just that in the past, he had always been like a headless fly, unable to find where he should go. Now that he finally had a clear goal, he didn't want to delay any longer. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others looked at each other, their expressions showing traces of excitement and nervousness. At night, Bailey Hongzhuang came to Mu Lingbing and Lan Yunxiao's room. Seeing Bailey Hongzhuang appear, Mu Lingbing and Lan Yunxiao were both astonished before revealing joyful smiles. Yixian, why are you here? Could it be that you can't sleep tonight because you're leaving for the Sun-Moon sect tomorrow? Mu Lingbing pulled Bailey Hongzhuang's hand and pulled her into the house, a loving smile on her face. When Mu Lingbing said this, Lan Yunxiao couldn't help but glance at her. You should be talking about yourself, right? Chapter 2146. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Mu Lingbing didn't hide her emotions. In reality, ever since she'd found out about this, she'd been feeling uneasy. She'd hoped to see Mu Jints safe and sound when she returned to Sun Moon Palace. But if Mu Jints was still alive, then there was no reason not to look for her all these years. Now that she hadn't even gone to Sun Moon Palace, she already had a certain judgment in her heart. My feelings are very complicated right now. I don't know what Yu Siqing did to my master. Mu Lingbing's gaze was heavy. All these years, Yu Siqing had used countless methods of torture on them. However, Yu Siqing hated Mu Jints the most. She must have used the most insidious methods to deal with Mu Jints. Bailey Hongzhuang's heart sank. This was the last thing she'd wanted to happen. Grandfather hadn't known about Mu Lingbing's identity, but grandmother had. Since grandmother had gone to the Yu family and never appeared again, then something must have happened. She was very worried. If it was bad news, she was worried that grandfather wouldn't be able to take it. After all, grandfather had been looking for grandmother all these years as a pillar of support. If grandmother was no longer around, then it would be a huge blow to grandfather. If that was the case, then grandfather might as well not know. At least he'd still have some faith in his heart. In that moment, the three people in the room fell silent. They were all familiar with Yu Siqing's methods, so they couldn't be any clearer. As the atmosphere in the room grew heavier, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but say, "Mother, the situation might not be as bad as we think. Yu Siqing's personality is very strange. She likes to torture people and see them in pain, but doesn't want to immediately take their lives. So grandmother might have been poisoned or injured." Although this was only a guess, Bailey Hongzhuang felt that it was very likely. She could deduce this from the things Yu Siqing had done all these years. However, if this was really the case, then Mu Jints must have suffered greatly all these years. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Mu Lingbing's eyes brightened. If possible, she really hoped that was the case. Then, at least she would have a chance to see her master again. She had grown up with her master since she was a child, so one could imagine her feelings for her master. Yi Xian is right. With Yu Siqing's personality, it's very likely that she would do such a thing. Perhaps Yu Siqing had poisoned his mother-in-law to trap her in the Sun Moon Palace in order to reduce the possibility of his mother-in-law appearing. After all, father-in-law often went to Yu Siqing to ask about mother-in-law's situation. It's very possible that Yu Siqing did this. Lan Yunxiao's eyes flickered with a wise and far-sighted light. Based on his understanding of Yu Siqing over the years, this possibility was very high. However, if her injuries were really that serious, he didn't know if his mother-in-law would be able to hold on after so many years. Mu Lingbing nodded slightly. Bailey Hongzhuang and Lan Yunxiao's words made her feel better. As long as there was a glimmer of hope, they could not give up. She had been living as an orphan for so many years. If she had the chance to reunite with her family, that would be the happiest thing for her. Chapter 2147. Father, Mother, I came here tonight to give this to you. Bailey Hongzhuang took out 2 white porcelain bottles from her cosmos bag and gave them to Mu Lingbing and Lan Yunxiao. What is this? Lan Yunxiao asked. This is a rejuvenation pill. Bailey Hongzhuang's voice was clear and gentle. She had already thought of this long ago. Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing had suffered under Yu Siqing's torment all these years. Not only had their bodies been hollowed out, but their appearances had also aged greatly. Compared to cultivators of the same age, Lan Yunxiao and Mu Lingbing were undoubtedly much older. This wasn't something Bailey Hongzhuang wanted to see. She knew the method to refine the rejuvenation pill, so she began to refine it. Coincidentally, the alchemist competition was being held, and the rejuvenation pill was a suitable pill for the competition. She had already successfully refined one pill when she tried to refine it before, and she had successfully refined another one during today's competition. Now, she was giving it to Mu Lingbing and Lan Yunxiao. Mu Lingbing and Lan Yunxiao's eyes flashed with astonishment. They never thought that Bailey Hongzhuang would give them the rejuvenation pill. Yixuan, this rejuvenation pill is expensive. Keep it for yourself, Lan Yunxiao said. A 6th grade pill's value couldn't be compared to an ordinary pill. Although the rejuvenation pill wasn't helpful to cultivation, its allure wasn't inferior to other pills. On the contrary, cultivators who pursued the rejuvenation pill would be even more fanatical. Mu Lingbing, on the other hand, was envious of the rejuvenation pill. As a woman, who could resist its allure? Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly. I refined this pill for the two of you. With my current age, I can't use it, so what's the point of keeping it? We're leaving tomorrow to see grandmother, so it's just right for father and mother to use it tonight. Bailey Hongzhuang winked at Mu Lingbing and Lan Yunxiao, then walked out of the room. She knew that her parents didn't want to burden her, but that didn't matter. Although the value of a grade 6 medicinal pill was high, they could completely afford it. Moreover, she herself was an alchemist, so this was even less of a problem. As she watched Bailey Hongzhuang leave, Mu Lingbing didn't even have time to say anything. Looking at the white porcelain bottle in her hand, Mu Lingbing couldn't help but sigh at the good daughter she had. Turning around, Mu Lingbing saw Lan Yunxiao frowning as he looked at the rejuvenation pill in his hand. He looked like he wanted to talk more with Bailey Hongzhuang. Don't think about it, just eat it, Mu Lingbing said. This was what their daughter had meticulously prepared for them. In fact, they had only been imprisoned by Yu Siqing for more than 10 years, but they looked a few decades older. Torture would cause one to age quickly. Lingbing, Hongzhuang, Mu Lingbing rolled her eyes. If you don't want it, I'll use it. Tomorrow, you won't look like you're my age. Don't tell me you're with me. With that, Mu Lingbing turned around and walked inside. The heavens were really good to her. At least she had a good daughter. Lan Yunxiao watched helplessly as Mu Lingbing left, but at the same time, he followed her inside. The next day, Bailey Hongzhuang's group was ready to set off. Chapter 2148. The alchemist competition had just ended, so it was likely that all the major powers would soon know the details of the competition. At that time, the Tiangang sect would become the center of attention. At this time, the sect master of the Tiangang sect would be the center of attention if he left with them. Moreover, Yu Siqing and Lan Jingquang's family would naturally pay close attention to the Tiangang sect's movements, so they couldn't reveal any clues. When Mu Lingbing and Lan Yunxiao appeared before Si Tuyen and the others, their eyes lit up. Mu Lingbing and Lan Yunxiao looked like youths in their 20s. Their original weariness and vicissitudes of life had disappeared without a trace. On the contrary, they were full of energy and radiant. With this look, everyone understood how enviable Mu Lingbing and Lan Yunxiao were in the past. Mu Lingbing was originally a beauty. Her snow-white skin set off her flawless face, making her look like a character from a painting, bright and moving. Lan Yunxiao was even more handsome and elegant. His impeccable features exuded a scholarly and righteous aura. At a glance, he gave off a trustworthy feeling. As he walked, he had an elegant demeanor. Di Beichen used to think that since Bailey Hongzhuang was so beautiful, her parents must be stunning figures as well. Today, he saw that it was indeed so. Si Tuyen's eyes flashed with a trace of comfort as he looked at Mu Lingbing and Lan Yunxiao, who were well-matched and energetic. Although Mu Lingbing and Lan Yunxiao's appearances were still outstanding, the traces of exhaustion and pain couldn't be hidden. Now, all of that had disappeared as if it had never existed. Thinking carefully, everyone knew that Lan Yunxiao and Bailey Hongzhuang had taken the rejuvenation pill refined by Bailey Hongzhuang. I didn't expect the spring-returning pill's effects to be so good. Di Beichen's low and charming voice was filled with astonishment. He had only heard of the spring-returning pill's fame, but had never seen its effects. After seeing it with his own eyes today, he finally understood the power of this pill. In fact, as long as it was a 6th-grade pill, its effects were extremely shocking. Mu Lingbing and Lan Yunxiao's faces were full of smiles. The rejuvenation pill had been lost for a long time, so they didn't know its effects before. Now that he saw it today, the effect was simply too shocking. Looking at themselves in the mirror, they felt as if nothing had happened in the past 10 years. Everything was still the same. However, although his appearance remained the same, his heart was much more determined than before. After Bailey Hongzhuang helped everyone to disguise themselves, they left Tiangang sect under Situ Yan's lead. This time, Bailey Hongzhuang and others did not leave through the gate of Tiangang sect. It was too eye-catching. There was another passageway in Tiangang sect, which was extremely hidden. Only the sect master and young sect master knew about it. Yesterday, Si Tuyen had already made arrangements for the following matters, including their attitude towards the medicine sect and so on. Originally, he had to stay in Tiangang sect to oversee the overall situation, but now he was not in the mood to continue waiting. He only hoped that he could reach Sun Moon Palace as soon as possible. Nothing else could stop him.